Welcome to NACD Board Vision, where leading boardroom advisors, governance professionals, and seasoned directors discuss critical issues related to your responsibilities in the boardroom.
Hi, I'm Christopher Clark, publisher of NACD Directorship Magazine, and this is Board Vision. Today's topic is board communications and board effectiveness, and I'm pleased to let you know that I'm joined today by Margaret Peterson, president of Amerex and a director of VIAD, and Jeff Powell, who's an EVP at Diligent. Welcome.
Thank you.
What's creeping up in the top 10 list for performance and effectiveness is proper agenda setting. That how can you possibly address the things that you're supposed to do unless you're setting the agenda properly, accurately, and it also relates to getting the right information at the right time. Who is really setting the agenda? How you get the agenda?
It depends on the company.
Okay.
It is starting to evolve. A lot of times in some of the more authoritarian companies, management would set the agenda. The proper procedure would be for management to the CEO to set it with either the chairman if they're independent or the lead director. Increasingly, board directors are working with the lead director and saying this is where we want input, especially when they want to be covering a topic in more depth. Now, if that doesn't happen and directors, and I say plural, not hopefully not just one, and their topic isn't on there, they can add it on. However, that's going to usually fall under new business, additional business. It tends to be at the end of the meeting, so you get a very compressed time.
Well, it's very interesting hearing what Margaret has to say, and it certainly is something that we've seen recently, or that I've seen recently, is the recognized importance of setting the agenda is certainly something that's become not only a topic more popular in conversation, but in practice. It's not one of those things that's just sort of a fly-by-night or temporary thing that's bubbled to the surface. It really is something that I see as part of the best practice of how a board is going to run, how it's going to operate. And it really falls into that category of facilitating your board for being as successful as it can be. Because it's part of this topic of getting them the information that they need so that they can effectively do that job.
Margaret, next on the hit parade, in your experience as a director, how do you make special conversations a priority in the boardroom?
Okay, there are some conversations that, according to NACD research, are core, strategy, performance, risk management. I think an area that has been added is CEO compensation and say on pay. An area we found on the VIAD board that was getting increasing time in the boardroom is innovation and the role of disruptive technology changes in and how it impacts the competitive landscape, the way customers are doing business. It is critically important, and I think we're on the forefront, but there is an emerging trend that companies focus more on innovation. So we created it as a separate committee, a separate board level committee, so that we could delve in more depth on that specific topic and then bring those conclusions with recommendations and next steps and report back to the board.
Margaret did a great job of running down, many of these topics that now board members have to face, where it's no longer just, well, let's hear the sales report,
Right.
Let's hear the marketing report for this region. You're really moving away from kind of the standard boilerplate of producing that materials, and it's also the type of thing where you're having to produce materials for them, keep them involved, not just at board meetings, but basically all of the time.
Absolutely.
And one of the things that our electronic board portal does is enable the company, the governance professionals at the company to communicate with the board on an ongoing basis, whether or not it's distributing materials in a more timely method or addressing one of these issues that might have come up in between board meetings that can't wait till the next board meeting. It needs to be addressed now, whether or not it's an informal board meeting or a formal board meeting or whatever the discussion is. This can happen electronically. This is also a way in which materials can be reviewed in advance and agendas can be set in advance.
I think another shift in agendas and how the meetings are run is that in the past there may have been more of an expectation you'll get the information, hopefully far enough in advance, and then we're going to run through this presentation, and maybe the presentation will take 20, 25 minutes and we'll discuss it for 5. Now directors are saying, we've read it.
Right.
So
Move on.
you know, you can spend 30 seconds, per slide, and we'll do that. Your presentation is 5 minutes, and then we want a meaningful discussion on the topic for 25 minutes, and that really is a switch.
What you're talking about is the dynamic that we see with board members, and it is what the best practices are, that they want the materials in a timely way in advance. They're going to have read them, they're going to have their questions. When they come in, it's about discussing things, it's about making business decisions, it's about strategic initiatives, it's not about reviewing materials anymore.
It's an engagement. It's not a one-way street anymore where management presents to the board and then there's a motion that's raised and everyone votes on it. It's an engaged dialogue.
Are there certain prep materials that you deem more important than others? And I'm not talking stylistically, but kind of content-wise by topic bucket. And then, in your experience, again, you've got both sides of the coin here in terms of prep materials or any other governance-related communication vehicle. Give us your thoughts on what might be missing or improved. And Margaret, go ahead.
Sure. In terms of, are there specific information that's more important? I'd say it depends on the agenda for the meeting. Depends on what some of those core topics are, and it also depends on the individual background and expertise of a director. The chair of the audit committee may spend more time on the financials, but probably can go through them faster than someone who's really bringing more of a digital marketing expertise. So I think it's very individualistic.
Well, there you have it, the director's point of view. Jeff?
Every board now is really very carefully selected to have board members with different areas of expertise. Whether or not it's directly related to the business or some new direction the business might want to be, or financial or technical or whatever it is. There are different materials that get distributed, and it's also the ability to share the materials to help spread that expertise so that it's no longer looking to individual board members for their one area of expertise, but using the expertise of existing board members to help spread that information across the rest of the board. So for example, if you're looking at a new topic like cybersecurity, you may have an expert on your board,
Right.
but you're going to want to be able to also utilize that expert's knowledge to spread materials to the rest of the board and help them understand it, to bring up the overall knowledge of the board.
I would also say when it's information that's provided by management is clearly core and important to the meeting. But in today's world, you don't need to rely just on that information. There is a wealth of information that's available online and in social media, and I think it's important that directors be following that and know what what the employees are saying, what your vendors, your customers are saying, what's being said about your competitors. And this isn't going and trying to develop secret sources or going behind the scenes. You can find out amazing information online or just by following the social media sources.
Well, Margaret and Jeff, if we jump into cybersecurity and social media, we'll have to do 2 more episodes, which I'd like to do, by the way. And I personally just want to thank you for joining me today.
Thank you.
And on behalf of NACD and Diligent, thank you for joining us today. My name is Chris Clark, and this is Board Vision.